10 years ago, Subaru and Toyota teamed together to create a couple of cracking little sports cars, the BRZ and 86. Now, the two Japanese brands are back at it again with some more joint venture shenanigans to create their first dedicated electric cars. And this is Subaru's version, the Solterra. Before we explore the Solterra further, a couple of things on the clicks. Don't forget to subscribe, click the bell icon for notifications, and if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. The Solterra doesn't go on sale in Australia until mid-2023, but today, a full year before its launch, we get to have a first close-up look at an overseas example of what is a crucial new SUV for Subaru. Combining two Latin words for its name, Sol for sun and Terra for earth, Subaru's nameplate rolls off the tongue more naturally than Toyota's BZ4X twin, which sounds like a better name for a Star Wars droid. Compare images of the Solterra and BZ4X, and it's very obvious they have more in common than another pair of EV platform buddies, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6. But we'll keep today's focus mainly on the Solterra. Let's give you a bit of a size perspective for the Solterra. So 4.7 metres long, that makes it a bit longer than a Forester, but shorter than an Outback wagon. Now, the wheelbase, the gap between the front and the rear axles, that's actually 10 centimetres longer than the Outbacks though. And that's a bit of a trend that we're seeing with these EV SUVs, where they're having that wheel at each corner stance. And compared with rivals, well, it's longer than a Hyundai Ioniq 5, but a touch shorter by the slightest margin from an EV6, and also shorter than the Tesla Model Y. What do you think of the design? For me, it does seem that Toyota's designers maybe had a little bit more of a say than Subaru's designers in it, but I think it's still a pretty attractive, handsome SUV. I think it sits quite naturally within the Subaru range. A couple of details that distinguish it from its Toyota rival: hexagonal grille, C-shaped headlights, and there's also C-shaped tail lights at the back, which are also different to the Toyota version. Both the Toyota and the Subaru have this wheel arch cladding here, which looks very stylish, very Subaru definitely, and less controversial than it is on the new WRX. Let's come into the profile now. So a bit of a sporty profile, quite similar to the EV6 in a way, and that's not a bad thing at all. This is something that could give the Solterra a bit of a USP over its rivals. Got ground clearance here, 210 millimetres. That's not far off that of a Forester, so that does bode well for its all-wheel drive capability. That's going to be very important for Subaru, obviously, in this country. Wheel sizes, well, on the all-wheel drive model, there's 18 or 20-inch wheels. These are the 20s. I guess just one other feature to point out, integrated roof rails, which is very important for a Subaru. We still know few details about the specifications we'll get for Australian versions, but what we do know is that we'll definitely get an all-wheel drive model, because Subaru has made that a signature feature on its vehicles in Australia. No boxer engine under the bonnet, of course. The only thing that is flat in this vehicle is the battery. This model employs an 80 kilowatt electric motor on each axle for a total of 160 kilowatts. There's approximately a 460 kilometre range, which puts it behind a long-range Model Y Tesla, for example. That's 505 kilometres, but between the Ioniq 5 and EV6. Now, for this all-wheel drive model, there's X mode, as we've seen with other Subaru SUVs. So that brings traction-enhancing features, dirt, mud, snow modes, and for the Solterra, it also gets grip control, which is essentially an off-road cruise control system. And off-road capability, as we said earlier, could certainly be a major USP over its direct EV rivals. But the bigger question, will Subaru Australia consider a front-wheel drive variant that would create a cheaper entry point and also be the first front-wheel drive Subaru since the 1998 second-generation Liberty? That front-wheel drive model has the same 71.4 kilowatt-hour battery, but just the single electric motor on the front axle, but it's 150 kilowatts, so it's actually not that less powerful than the all-wheel drive model. And the range is longer, 530 kilometres approximately. Now, don't panic. You're not going to get a left-hand drive Solterra in Australia. This is a European version that we're sampling here. Now, something to point out, the interiors of the Toyota and Subaru EVs are virtually identical. That's slightly disappointing because you kind of feel that a cabin is a great opportunity for a manufacturer to really get its personality into a car. That aside, it is a pretty smart interior and a couple of distinctive elements. One of them that you're not going to get in the Subaru is the yoke steering wheel. That's in the BZ4X. You get a conventional round thing. I think that's probably a good thing, actually. I'm really not sure about these yoke steering wheels. And you also get this rather weird recessed instrument cluster up here, but I also quite like that. 12.3-inch infotainment screen here, nice and panoramic. You can also have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto on there. Practicality elements, dual cup holders here, wireless charging tray in here, console bin, if I can open it, there we go. Yeah, kind of medium, decent door pockets with a couple of moulded sections. Now, a couple of safety features that we're going to see on the Solterra. It's going to be a 360-degree panoramic view monitor, which will come up via this central infotainment screen, and also safe exit assist, which we've seen on a couple of other vehicles from the likes of Hyundai, and that's where it tries to stop you from opening your passenger door or your driver's door into oncoming traffic. So that's quite a couple of useful additions there. In terms of materials, there's quite a quality feel to the interior of the Solterra, and you even get some interesting materials on the dash here, like sort of eco-inspired fabric. Now, the Solterra's wheelbase isn't quite as long as those of the EV6 or the Ioniq 5, but there's still plenty of space back in this rear seat. I reckon you could easily get a 6-foot person behind a 6-foot person up front. Toe space could be a little bit more generous. You might ask someone up front just to lift their seat a little bit higher. Not quite a fully flat floor, you just got this slight hump here in the middle, but it's very close, very close. The only thing I'd say is that the seat bench, it's a little bit on the low side, so you can see got a bit of a gap here under my under thigh, but the bench itself and the seat back, it's a nice angle to it and nice cushioning. And in terms of details, well, we've got centre armrest, a couple of cup holders, and a little slot here for your smartphone or something else, some coins. Got a couple of USB ports here, seat heating on this particular model. I'm guessing this is a high spec model, and a couple of vents. So not a bad place to be. But let's check out the boot. Last thing to check out, boot space. Auto tailgate. I'm sure that will be standard. Okay, now at this point, we do not have an official capacity figure for the Solterra's boot, but I don't know, I'm guessing it's pretty similar to that of the EV6 and the Ioniq 5, which are around that kind of 460, 480 litre mark, actually a bit more in the Ioniq 5's case. You know, you do have this sort of rate rear that will cut into luggage space a little bit, but you know, look, there's a good width to it. We've got some underfloor bits here where you can stick your cables. We've got a couple of pull down hooks, a light, cargo blind, and I can tell you that the seat backs fold 60/40. How much would the Solterra cost? Well, we've got no idea at this stage, and it wouldn't really be an expectation of Subaru Australia to divulge that information a year ahead of its launch. But what we do know is that an all-wheel drive version of this car costs about $65,000 in the US, and here in Australia, the EV6 and Ioniq 5 rivals cost about $70,000 to $75,000 in all-wheel drive form. So we would expect the Solterra to be cheaper than that, particularly if they bring in that front-wheel drive version, but again, we don't know if they're going to do that. Still, either way, there's a chance for this Subaru to be a very tempting proposition in an increasingly competitive segment.